There are 3 distinct and closely related steps involved in developing an implementation strategy. You need to finish each step before proceeding to the next. Megan's going to give you an overview of the steps, and then she'll give you an overview of the Excel worksheet, which you might also hear us refer to as a spreadsheet or a matrix. And finally, she'll show you how to complete step 1. After that, Brad Higdon will give specific examples of how his office did step 1, since they're the first office to follow this streamlined process. And then Rem and Joe will talk about how the process went in their field office, sharing some tips and lessons learned. So Megan, what are the steps?
So the steps of the implementation strategy are: number 1, identify the work needed, the tasks, projects, activities to implement the RMP. Number 2, to prioritize the work over the next 3 to 5 years. And 3, schedule priority projects, so looking at the number of widgets or acres per year you intend to accomplish. There are also 2 other important considerations: budget and communications, which are to be completed in a parallel but separate process. I'll briefly describe each step for you. Step 1, outline the work. Ideally, step 1 takes place after the Record of Decision, or ROD, is signed. The goal of step 1 is to identify and outline all the work, both ongoing, demand-driven tasks and one-time projects, that are needed to meet the goals and objectives laid out in your RMP. This would include everything from activity-level plans, such as ACEC plans or travel management plans written for a specific area, to responding to requests for permits or rights-of-ways, to inspecting and monitoring resources and resource use. Although not everything will be specifically identified in the RMP, any work needed to meet the goals and objectives of the RMP should be identified in the implementation strategy. To complete step 1, the entire interdisciplinary team must participate, so all the potential projects and ongoing workloads for each resource can be identified. Generally speaking, the management actions from the RMP will be categorized and entered into the Excel worksheets in 6 general resource categories and broken down further into the resource subcategories, similar to those in your land use plan. I'll go through the categories and subcategories in just a minute. Step 1 also involves identifying the project element, or PE code, which is the budget classification of the project, and any information that you might have on the geographic location of the project, such as the entire management area or a specific region of the field office where each project might take place. Your field manager or planning and environmental coordinator can explain what the PE codes are if you're not really familiar with them. So step 2, it's called establishing priorities. In step 2, the team will work together to determine the priorities for each task or project needed to implement the plan. First, you'll need to determine the critical factors to consider in setting priorities for your plan. For example, what unique characteristics of geography, resource issues, public interests, commercial opportunities, etc. should be considered in developing priorities. Is a high demand for energy development a driving force? Are there outside pressures from the public or local governments? Particular areas of environmental risk? What sequencing considerations are there? We'll provide you a list of factors to get started. After discussing these factors, the team will assign a priority and magnitude for each of the tasks that you identified in step 1. There are many methods for completing the priority setting exercise. In the next module, we'll go through some of them. Regardless of which method you choose, it's critical for the field manager to be fully engaged in this step. The manager can provide an overall perspective or vision that spans the program priorities. The priority setting exercise also provides a great opportunity for you to involve your cooperating agencies or partners. Partners can influence priority setting by providing their insight on goals and offering assistance in implementation. We'll discuss different ideas for involving your partners in the process in step 2. Finally, step 3, scheduling tasks. Step 3 uses the priorities identified in step 2 to begin to schedule implementation activities over the next 5 years. In other words, you'll be estimating how many widgets will be accomplished or acres treated in each of the next 5 fiscal years. This involves careful consideration of non-discretionary workloads, future funding, and staffing levels. This is why it's so critical to involve your partners. They may have funding or staffing to help you complete widgets in an area that's important to them. This step will be revised each year, so adjustments can be made as priorities and budgets change. When you finish step 3, your worksheet will be complete, and you'll receive the target for completing the implementation strategy. In addition to completing the worksheet, the implementation strategy can be even more advantageous tool by incorporating budget planning and a communication strategy. There are many options for integrating the implementation strategy into your budget and workforce planning. For example, you can use the implementation strategy worksheet while developing your project target allocation and your annual work plan.
So Megan, since you're a program lead in a state office, you're well-versed in budget stuff. So what should the people out in the field know about the project target allocation and the annual work plan?
So the PTA, or Project Target Allocation, and the AWP, or Annual Work Plan, are tools that are used to help the field and state office request funding and plan for their workforce. If you want to know a little bit more about it, you can talk to your field manager or budget person, or go to the BLM's intranet page on budget. In terms of communication, the projects, priorities, and scheduling can be used to share the story of your office and potentially gain some support for the strategies you're doing within the BLM and externally with the public and cooperators. This could lead to additional funding and labor support.
Previously, budget and communications were part of this implementation strategy process, but we separated them out because most of the people who would develop those pieces are probably going to be different than most of those who fill out the implementation strategy worksheet. And these are flexible aspects of the implementation strategy, so we highly encourage you to incorporate them in whatever manner and timing that makes the most sense for you. For example, the communication strategy could be developed at the same time as steps 1 through 3, and a budget strategy might be more effective after step 3 is completed. So Megan, is there anything else?
Yes, remember the planning cycle? Each office should evaluate the implementation framework annually to determine what they've accomplished in that fiscal year and how that impacts their goals and priorities for the next year and beyond. This should be done in time to inform and affect the budget process. However, this doesn't have to be limited to an annual update. The worksheet can be updated at any time in consideration of changing priorities and workloads. It's meant to be flexible and adaptable. The more the framework is refined, the more useful it will be to you in the out years.
Okay, now that you have a general understanding of the entire process, you're almost ready for step 1, identify the work.